Hey guys, I'm going to do a code review today of this code from somebody on the Discord server. Specifically, this is, I don't know if there's a way to pronounce this. I don't know if that's Oman H or something like that. Let's go with that. Sorry if I've mispronounced that, but um, anyway, I'm just going to go through this code, and the I always need to start by saying that these boss battles, the Catacombs of the Class, the Fountain of Objects, the final battle in particular, also the um, Hunting the Manticore, but that one to a smaller degree because it's a smaller boss battle. These are hard. Just getting the pieces in there working, having a program this big that works is a huge accomplishment. So I'm going to point out some things that I might have done different, things to consider. That doesn't necessarily make this code bad, and everybody's at a different spot in their journey. um and if this is, for example, this is your first time really dealing with objects kind of at scale, like it's a lot. So just getting it working is the main thing, but I do think it's still worth pointing out some things that I might have done differently, because I think it's a good exercise for learning. So that's what this is. I'm gonna do no more than about 20 minutes of recorded time. I might spend a little bit of unrecorded time poking around a little bit too, but try to keep this fairly small and time boxed. All right. So the first thing that I will call out here is this, and I already mentioned this in Discord, and that is this, like, the struct is public, but then like everything in here is internal, 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 internal. There's a constructor that's public. Let's jump around and see internal, internal, public. So the interface will make them public by default, but since this is public, then everything else in here is going to be public. Um, anyway, just a lot of use of internal. So I think it's worth kind of capturing like my thinking on that, and that is that I would say, by and large, you should, at the beginning of your C# journey, you should almost ignore everything but private and protected, or sorry, private and public. Get used to just those two things. The goal of accessibility levels at all is a mechanism wherein you can say, look, I want to hold this back. I don't want just anybody to have access to it. And other things are saying, no, I expect, like this, I expect people to use it. And the problem that solves is that anything that's private has limited use, and so it's easy to change it. So if you hold something back and make it private, that stuff will be easy to change. Anything that's public, you could end up with 1,000 lines of code that all touch it. So you want to keep things somewhat limited, except that you also need, like, in order for somebody to use things need to be public. So it's this sort of two options. Is this part of what's needed for the outside world to use it? If so, it's public. If not, it's private. And I think just starting from public and private on everything is a really good starting point. Internal comes in when you're saying, look, I have this thing and I can't make it private because it does need to be used outside of the class, but I really need to hold that back. Like, I don't want the outside world just having access to that, because I need to be able to change it. I want, when I do need to change it, I want to be able to only change like this little set of classes here and know that I'm not going to break anything else. So that's where internal comes in. Like I said, it's sort of a secondary tool, and I had data. I've still got it somewhere. Actually, you know what? Maybe I can find that really quick. We'll see. Yeah, I found it. This is some data I have on the different accessibility levels of three different projects. These two are open source. So Monogame and the ShareX. And then this one is the program I work on for work. So obviously I can't like share any of that with you, but I do think you can look at the breakdown here and learn a lot from it. So you can see like almost like a whole bunch of stuff is public. And this is averaged over all of the, basically I computed the percentages and then I average the percentages. So each of these three projects have equal weight in that average. But like this is a much bigger project, and it didn't like, it doesn't get excess weight. But you just have to look at this a little bit to see like almost everything is public or private. Internal and protected are like a distant third and fourth. And then these other like complex ones, private protected and protected internal, and the file one are like they hardly ever used. Um, so the point is like when, on your journey, start with public and private, and like don't worry about the rest. So that means that since a type, as we've got it here, can't be, oops, I don't need this anymore. Let me rearrange. Hang on. All right, yeah. So like types must like they can't be private. Not when they're here. There's another way you can put classes inside of other classes, and those can be private. But like make your types public and then decide which of my members of the class should be public and which should be private. And you're going to have some of both. But so I would suggest that all of these internals maybe make sense as public. Certainly as a starting point. That way you don't have to think too hard about it. It's either public or it's private. It's a good starting point for this. So I just replaced that. Now they're all public. A couple other little things that come up here that I'll say is that this is, so at the Fountain of Objects, we haven't officially covered namespaces yet, but I will pretty much always prefer file scope namespaces because it removes a level of indentation. Again, that's just me, but that's what I would do, and that's probably the case in all of these. And let me just show you this really quick. So I come in here and I say, there's convert to file scope namespace. It shows me all of this. One thing that is in this, it's hard to see, is fix all occurrences in the project or the solution. I'm just going to do that and change them all. So like I said, oh, that one didn't unindent. That was weird. In fairness, the indentation here's got a couple of other, it needs a little bit of cleanup. Anyway, maybe that. All right. Oh, even still. This is one of those things where I feel like I don't know where I was going with that. That's all right. But I guess I'll say that like sometimes like that, just the indentation, like for me, that's a big deal. For other people, it's maybe not. But like I want to see like to me it makes a big difference in terms of readability to have like code that's like indented consistently, and it almost doesn't matter what indentation and things like that you use as long as you have that consistency. I think that matters a lot. So to me that's one of those things that it's like pay careful attention to it. It'll make your life easier when, especially on a bigger program like this where you keep coming back to it. All right, one other thing here, this has this using system, and like it's already, you can see how it's like faded out in here. It already is telling me using directive is unnecessary. In this case, it may be because we aren't, well, no, we're using random. So yeah, we do actually put the system namespace to use, except, and you can see this in here if you go to, I'm just going to edit the project file. So new C# code ends up with this implicit usings. You shouldn't have to turn that on. If you're using an old project, you may need to go in and change that. But in like this, there's a handful of namespaces that they're just ubiquitous. Like literally you use it everywhere. Of course you're going to use system. Of course you're going to use system.collections.generic. Of course you're going to use, no, I'm not going to think of them. I was going to say system.text, but I think system.text is not one of those. Link, the system. Is it just system.link? Might be. Yeah, just of course you're going to use that. Like these are so common in C# programming that they're just included automatically. So once again, I'll come in here and I'll say clean this up. So once again, if I click on this, there's remove unnecessary usings in, and you can make some choices here. I'm just going to apply it across the board. Poof, apply. So that probably fixed a few of them. Another thing I'm going to point out here is be consistent in your naming for your things. The usual, there's another indentation thing. The usual thing is, here's more indentation. And some of this might have been messed up because of what I had done. So the code might have been fine as it was before. I will say that sometimes it will redo your indentation if there's weirdness. If you just like I'm going to backspace this and put in that curly brace again and see how the rest of the stuff changes. like it unindented these, and it actually moved this else down the line. Um, it a lot of times it's not worth fighting the editor to like if it wants that indentation a certain way. A lot of times it's better to just let it do its thing. You can configure that stuff if you don't like it, but this is one of those things where like it makes sense to follow the convention of the language, so do that. Um, yeah. So the other thing I was going to say here, though, is naming conventions. Like again, it's important to be consistent. In C sharp, most things are upper camel case, or it's also called Pascal case, where it's like this: the first letter of everything is capitalized. The two things that aren't are local variables like the size and parameters that are just lower camel case, or if you don't like, that's also just called camel case, and it's called camel case because it's got the big letters in the middle of it like a camel's hump. And then the third other category that things often land in is lower camel case with an underscore prefix. So so almost everything is upper camel case the except local variables like this size and parameters, which are just plain old lower camel case, and then private fields are usually lower camel case but with an underscore in front of it. So these are not fields; these are properties. So I would generally say these should be, grid size and game grid. And if you missed that, I just double clicked on this and then I hit Control R, and then I just typed in my new thing, and it will update all the references to it. And you can check these boxes for comments and strings, but there. So now we have like this very consistent take on things. So let's spend the rest of our time talking about like objects. And I think like you see a lot of this here. Like, so game has a row and a column, and let's see if I can find more of this. There's pit has pit row, pit column. And I think there's more of these too. If I go to player, does there? There's another. I had renamed that. Yeah, so there's just a lot of these places that have like, come on, they have just a lot of like rows and columns everywhere. So I like, to me, I think that is like, that makes a good class. And I kind of thought this, like looking at the file location.cs, I thought I'd see that in here, and it's not here. But it doesn't mean we can't do something with this. Like what this has all these things, and then they're used. So these are like the fountain row. Like what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna rename this to locations, and then I'm gonna throw in a new type that's just a. I'm actually gonna make it a record. I could have made this a struct. I could have made it a plain old class. I like just the short version for records. And so now anytime we're dealing with a row and a column, we could use a location instead. So for example, this right here, we're using fountain row, fountain column, pit row, pit column. All of these could become that. And we can do the same thing here. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and make a few other changes here, and we'll skip forward. I do want to show where I'm at right now. So I just, like, there's this game and it has a location, and then I just got rid of the row and column. There was like a, let me back up just briefly. There's a row and a column, and I just replaced those with this location, and then I rebuilt it, and I have 158 errors. So some of these things, like if you can get it right in the first place, it'll save you some pain, but it's not like I can't fix these. These are all pretty straightforward. Just another little thing that I'm looking at here. So it looks like, so this is this is setting up the board basically, depending on the size. So small, this is medium, this is large. I'm going to put that on that line. I like that better, but not everybody does. Do what you want with that. Anyway, small, medium, large, like this sets up one Amarok and one pit. This medium has one Amarok and two pits. This has two Amaroks and two pits, which makes me start to realize what this T location is. That is like the second one. Anyway, I think there's a bug in here though, because this says total pits.add, and then it uses pit column, pit row, pit column, pit row. I think in this case, it should have been pit T location. So it should have been that like there's two of them. Okay, I think I'm at a place where we can sort of illustrate the benefit of having this separate little class. I think this code, I'm not totally sure what this is doing. I think I know what it's doing. I could be wrong. I'd have to analyze it more, and I don't have time for that. But like this code right here, I think it's saying I'm going to pick a fountain location, and then I'm going to try repeatedly to like fill in other things. Now, having said that, the randomness is not a part of this challenge officially. This person has decided to do it. I think it's a really cool idea, but you don't need to do it. So it's totally legitimate to just hard-coded like fixed values for this challenge. The randomness is actually can be kind of tricky, especially if you want to like flush out all the weirdness that can happen here. I mean, for example, if you randomly pick the fountain in the bottom right corner, and then you randomly pick a pit immediately to the left of that and immediately up from that, there's no way to get to the fountain. And if you handcraft it, it's easy to spot that. If you randomly generate it, you're going to have to teach the computer to check for all these things that you as a human could just check for yourself. The advantage of randomization is replay. Like you can play the game a whole bunch more because you don't know where things are. If it's a predefined thing, then you figure it out, and then the game's not that much fun to play anymore because there's not the search aspects of it. But so I think that's what this is doing. But like, so this code right here. So if the pit column, which I need it, like this is pit location dot column is not equal to fountain location dot column, and pit location dot column does not equal I guess I'm not totally sure what that's looking for now, because this is looking at this pit T. If pit location dot column does not equal pit like the T, that's the second pit. Hang on. Well, after studying this code a little more, I'm still not totally sure, and I also don't want to get too hung up on this. I think the code here is trying to ensure that we don't generate pits at the same location. We don't generate these Amaroks at the same location as the fountain. What I was gonna say here is this, that I think like all these checks to say like are they the same or not, could with that record type in particular, I could say if pit location does not equal fountain location, and just simplify it to that. Now it's simple because these two things like and we could define it ourselves, but a record will automatically define equality to mean do all of my members align. That's value semantics. Do these two things have equal data? And so in this case, that would be, do they have equal rows? Do they have equal columns? So now in that case, just picking these things solves that problem really well. Now I'm going to spend just a minute off screen and try out a different algorithm. So stay tuned. I'm actually already at the 20-minute mark, so I don't want to keep going too long, but I do want to show this, and that is that I've changed the algorithm here, and I mean I've done enough of these kinds of things that this felt natural to me, but like to arrive at this yourself is not trivial. It takes a lot of experience and practice to get there. But what I've done here is I just said, look, what I'm going for, I think. I don't. So this, I think, is going to give us a little bit different results than what we had before, but I think it achieves what the intended goal was, and that is being able to pick locations for each of these things: 2 pits, 2 amarocks, and 1 fountain. So what I do is I say I'm going to make a list, and again, I could in this case I know there's 5, so I could have used an array. Lists are still coming, so you could peek ahead and see. The advantage of a list over an array is that it's really easy to add items to it. This code was already using lists, so I'm not afraid to just use it here. But we haven't covered that yet at this point in the book officially. So I could have used an array here. I didn't. So what we do is we make a list of locations that we want to keep track of, and then for each of them, so for it's like basically this is like repeat 5 times. We want to generate a location that we know hasn't been used. So we're going to start with creating a new random location. I made this method. All it does is it makes a new location, and it just uses the size. This code, it's kind of interesting. Like this code, I just have a single size, which by the way, I renamed that. I don't remember what it was, but something else. I just changed the name. But to me, this is simpler. So now I can have, and here, like this code doesn't assume that I have a square thing, 4 rows, 4 columns, 6 rows, 6 columns. This assumes that it could be 4 rows and 8 columns. That's a legitimate size, whereas this code doesn't. There's a little bit of a mismatch there, and it'd be really easy to just change this so that it's consistent. So why not, right? Okay, there. So now it's just a size. So we generate a location randomly, and then we say, okay, I'm going to loop through all of the locations that I've already got and see if that equals the new location. And if so, then I'm going to continue. Oh, you know what? That's the fact this is highlighting it this way. I don't want to continue to the next one here. I actually want to get out of this loop and try again. So I'm going to tweak this. Hang on. Okay, a couple little tweaks. I added in a variable to tell me whether I found it or not. I'm going to assume I haven't found it, and I'm going to loop, while not found. So if dang it, even this isn't right. This says I found a copy. Hang on one more time. You guys aren't seeing the time that's passing while I've got that paused, but I renamed it. So if it's already used, and so as long as what we do is we generate a location, and then we assume that it's not already in use, but then we're going to look through every single location we've already generated and see, and if we do find it, then we set that to true, which will cause us to loop again. And if not, then we add it, and then it'll be already used will be false, and we'll break out of that. I have not ran this. It could be a little bit wrong, but that's the idea. So, okay. Anyway, this is some data structures and algorithm stuff going on here. But anyway, randomly pick 5 distinct locations. And then because the way this code is set up, it's got these like specific things here. I just copy them over to that. So in this case, regardless of whether we went small, medium, or large size, we're gonna end up generating 5 locations that are unique. Even though, strictly speaking, like the small board doesn't need 2 of everything. It doesn't need 2 pits and 2 amarocks. So that's something we could do, but I don't know. I'm not too worried about that. Though there is one change I'm gonna make, and that is now that I see better what these are, I'm going to rename this to pit location 1 and pit location 2. And I'm going to call this Amarok location 1 and Amarok location 2. That makes more sense to me. Like the T didn't, I didn't know what that meant, and I believe I've got it right, but I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, to me, having it be 1 and 2 is clear. Like I said, this is doing a little bit of extra work that may not be strictly necessary, but it's okay. It works well enough for now. Though I will say one thing we could do here is we could make these lists like this, given, and anytime you see like a 1 and a 2, like if you're naming things whatever 1 whatever 2, you might stop and say, well, you know what I actually need is lists or arrays instead of like 1 2 3. And if you got 1 or 2 or 3 of them, it may not demand a list, but if you don't know how many there are going to be, or if it could be a whole lot, you don't want to be like declaring separate variables or separate properties for every single one of those. Just to kind of talk through design on that a little bit. Like one thing you could do is you could say, well, here's my size, and then what I want is like something like that. You pass those in, and then you need to make some changes here. So now we're going to need 1 plus Amarok count plus pit count of these generated. And then you would just do something like list of location pits and list of location Amaroks. And now I can ditch the 2s. Anyway, like I said, I'm really running out of time here. I'm going to back that up and go take a look around, see what else there might be that we might want to change. One thing I do want to mention on this, so we made this location record. As I'm seeing this now, like more what I feel like I'm seeing here is that this is not, I mean, it is about location. Like it is about like figuring out what these locations are, but that's just the data that it has. And what it actually is like the board generation code. And I feel like I like that name better. This is like a map generator or something like that. So I like that name better. And now we kind of detach it from this. I also think at this point, I think I would say let's make this a class. And the reason I say that is a struct is the right call when a struct will only be the right call when your thing is data focused. If it's behavior focused, and it's hard to like make that distinction, right? But like all of this generation stuff to me feels like something that's behave like I mean, yes, it produces some data kind of as a byproduct, but this is really about like we call this and it produces all these locations. So in my mind, I would rather have that be a class, just because there's such a heavy aspect of behavior, like the logic of like how do we set up a game. So even though there's a lot of data involved, so it is in that sense kind of data focused, but like I said, that's just kind of the result of what it's doing. So for me, I like that name map generator better. Your mileage may vary. Like I said, I really need to stop, but I do I haven't cleaned up this code yet, but I like this code here and this code here. It's used this is for pits and this is for Amaroks, and the intent here is, am I like by an Amarok? And there's we have to check in 8 different directions. Yeah, that's what this is doing. To me, I would say this makes a lot of sense as a method, maybe in that location record that we made. So I'll just show you here really quick. I took the code that was there and just moved it over here. And I think this is there are a lot of ways you can go about this. Are these two adjacent This just checks like are the rows and columns, are they within one. I think this is a fine way to do it. I've changed the white space just a little bit. I'm using A and B. I made this a static method. Um, but like this seems like a pretty reasonable solution to it, and now I can reuse this. Yeah. So yeah, like I said, we can clean up all this stuff now with just this new like R adjacent method. Oops, that's something up there. Something like that, which is now convenient that these two look almost the same. I'm not going to do it, but here's like this fountains, it's the same check. So that could use the same thing. I did promise I'd get to some more like object-oriented design stuff in this. And so I kind of want to do that here. There's one thing here that stands out to me is just a little bit weird. And that is, so for example, this player class, I think this is a good class. I think it's a reasonable, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't compile here. Because I just haven't patched everything back together. I guess I still have. Well, apparently I'm down to 18 errors instead of the 150, whatever. But player is derived from room, and room is derived from game. So go deeper. Nope, that's the end. And to me, that feels just a little bit weird, especially this part here where room is derived from game. The reason it feels a little weird to me is that inheritance is a strong relationship. You only want to use inheritance if there is some compelling, like if it's substitutable for the base class. If you had a game, because what happens here is let me just find a reasonable place to stick this. Where's the main? They're just going to come into here. I'm going to say something like, if I have a like this is because of how the substitutability works. This could be like I could have a game, but it could actually be an instance of room or player because those are derived from it, and that there should be zero surprises that come up from treating a player as though it's a game. And in this case, we're maybe okay, but it does strike me as it just feels a little weird that we have this. It's a player, but it is a whole game. I think the reason for this is likely coming down to code reuse. Inheritance does provide some degree of like if you're in the player class, you can use methods that are down a level, defined here in room or defined down here in game. If you're in room, you can use anything defined in game, and I think this takes advantage of that. Like there is like this validate move. So for example, player uses validate move. So it allows you to get access to these other methods. And I think that might be, I don't know for sure, but I think that might have been the main motivation for deriving from it, is so that you have access to these things. However, I think I would probably, like, there are other ways to share code, to like reuse code. And I would like, if the only reason is to reuse those methods or to like be able to just call those methods, that isn't in my mind a compelling enough reason to use inheritance. I only want to use it if it's like, if I'm making like a specialization, it's this thing that's like, well, it is at its very core, it is a game. And to me, a room is definitely not a game. A player, that one I'm a little more iffy on. I think depending on the mental model you have, that you could imagine these as being just these like tiles, and most of the board is empty, and a tile can have a pit on it or a player, and that you can pick up the whole tile and move it. In that sense, then it's, with the specific words I used, I might have called the one thing a tile, not a room. But you could still, like, I think that is not unreasonable. You could think of the player as the room. It's a room that's special in the sense that it has the player in it. But the calling it a game seems like a little bit of a stretch to me. Now, in this case, like the only place this is used is in player. So one thing I could do is I could just simply move this to player. Maybe. I think the catch is that there's also this grid size that's getting reused. I really meant this to be a 20-minute thing, and we're 35 minutes in, and I keep finding little things. The problem is I am gonna have to just cut myself off at some point because I could swirl around this for the next 5 hours, and I don't have time for that. Neither do people watching it. So really, we're only going to spend a couple more minutes on this. But so, for example, one thing I would maybe do different here. This is an enumeration, and it happens like 4, 6, 8. If in this case, if you're gonna assign numbers to these, this is the right numbers. I tend to almost never put these on there. And that's because for me, an enumeration is not generally meant to be just a set of numbers. It's meant to be a set of distinct values that aren't necessarily numeric. They aren't supposed to like have this number strongly associated with them. It's only in like kind of rare cases where I do want to have that association. What I would do, and I need to like the problem is at this point it's hard to know who exactly is using game size for its numbers. But you see a bunch of stuff here where we do stuff like there's just a bunch of this like casting to an end. What I would probably do is somewhere in here, I would probably just turn this into an int. And then what I would like my long-term goal for this would be something more like compute size for, actually, you know what I would do? Probably I'd push it up a level. Now I don't even need to do that. So that's all there. I can get rid of this, get rid of that. This part, what I would probably do, like there's some pattern here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 5, 6. Well, I could just hang on. Or not. Okay, so basically what's going on here is there's 8 of these per thing. So I think what I would probably do is something like, depending on the size, I would do something like do that, and then I'd say like something like 4 int I equals 0. Oh, I already got I for int. I'm just going to kind of copy what's up there for int j equals 0. J is less than grid size, j plus plus. And then do console.write. So the right line here picks up this, and then we do write for all of that, and then we just need to something like that. And now I don't even need all of this. It just however big it is, it'll figure it out. And the nice thing about this is now, like it doesn't have to just be 4, 6, or 8. It could be 5 or 3 or 2 or whatever it is. Like this is a lot more generalized to just get that line. And there are other ways to do this, but I think that should work. All right, like I said, I got to stop myself here. I think though that like in terms of like design, what I would probably be shooting for is having this game class, which has like this is keeping track of like what's within this. Um, it's just it gets interesting how this is set up. Like what I would probably do is I would take like all of this stuff. Like here's a list of kind of all the interesting bits, and I would actually push those down. So I would not. I would actually don't even know. I think I might like to me like so. This is whether the fountain's enabled or not. I might consider a fountain class that has that on it. But alternatively, I think to just push that down to the game makes sense. Same with game over. That makes sense as an aspect of the game. And then to have a list, in this case, to have a list of, so basically all these like important locations where all the Amarocks are, where all the pits are, where the fountain is. I say that makes sense for the game to just have that information. And then I would probably, where is this used? Find all references. Navigate rooms. So where is this called? So it's called on player. So like I almost feel like this class doesn't like I've seen a lot of designs for this that have like a room class, and then they'll have like subtypes that are like a pit is a subtype, the fountain is a subtype, the entrance is a subtype. I think you can do it that way. In this case, I don't know if you need that. Where this code is already at, you don't need that. But so I might that might be where I'd go with this is I might say all of this data, in fact all of that data makes sense down in the board itself in the game itself. So what I would be shooting for here at a very high level, like I said, I've doubled the length of this, twice as long as I meant to. I would say why not have a class that represents like the world, the map, the game, the whatever it is, and like all the data that it needs. And then I think I like the player class over here that has some of the stuff of like how do I move and some of that. And I'd probably keep that in there, but I think this room class that's kind of stuck in the middle of them, I would maybe. I mean, the thing is some of this stuff of like all this output, like detecting that there's a pit nearby, um, it does need to go somewhere. Maybe I don't know. Anyway, I'd have to play around with this a lot more. There's more that could be done here, but I don't. Like I said, I'll go back to kind of where I started. This is a very hard challenge. Just getting it completed in any form or fashion is a really big deal. So it's not anything to like. I pointed out a lot of little things that I would have done differently. The intent of like this type of code review thing is to just like give people a chance to see like different options, and then they can take the bits and pieces they look at and say, "Oh yeah, I like that. That was a good idea." If there's things in this that you don't like, don't do them. If there's things in this you're like, I don't know if I totally understand that, don't do it. Don't add code that you don't understand. But if you want to ask more questions, then I mean, Discord's a great place for that. Again, as always, like the YouTube, I check the comments, but I don't necessarily. I'm a lot more active on Discord than I am on YouTube, so you'll get much faster responses in Discord. But yeah, like I said, to me, in terms of like a design thing, like this is that little hierarchy of player to room to game. I want to do something about it. I'm not sure I've articulated very well yet what exactly I would want to change about it. But I think that it mostly comes down to reducing exactly what this room does, and maybe some of this stuff like I mean you see like navigate Amarok room, navigate pits. Maybe there is room here to have Amaroks and pits as separate types. And you could maybe even use like given how this works, like you might even be able to have a base class and even use like polymorphism because some of this stuff like danger, close Amarok, like maybe there's a way to you know, depending on the room type, to like say, hey, what rooms am I around, or like, hey, this is where the player's at. I'm at this location. Should we do something about it? anyway, I'll stop here because it's like I said, I meant to limit myself to 20 minutes, and we're at 45. So uh, I like it. I think it's good. Like I said, it's definitely a good start, and it shows a lot of effort and a lot of um, careful thinking. And like I said, there's a lot of stuff I have pointed out that I might have done a little differently, but don't make it, don't interpret that as it's like what you've done is wrong. There's lots of different ways you can approach these things, and it always comes down to trade-offs. And I think this is a good place to be. Being able to solve problems of this size is a really big deal, uh, and you've achieved that. So that's the main thing here. And that's all I got for right now. Like I said, I could keep going for another 3 hours, but I'm going to not. So I'll stop here. But um, thanks again, Oman H, for sharing this, and thanks for anybody watching on YouTube for joining me. And I'll see you guys later.